All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for waiting just a moment as we let some other folks in. So welcome to our July Clean Energy Communities Institute webinar, Funding Zero Emissions Fleets. This webinar will be a walkthrough of the New York State DEC Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Grant, the Zero Emissions Vehicle Rebate, and then at the end, we'll quickly go through a number of other opportunities related to electric vehicles that are available at the moment. This webinar is a partnership between the Hudson Valley Regional Council, NYSERDA, and Capital District Regional Planning Commission. Next slide, please. So to briefly introduce ourselves, in case we haven't met all of you yet, Carla Castillo is one of our Clean Energy Communities coordinators and the interim executive director of the Hudson Valley Regional Council. She provides technical support to a number of communities. Eleanor Peck is the CEC program manager. She provides technical support to municipalities in Dutchess, Putnam, and Westchester counties. And I am a CEC coordinator. I provide technical support to municipalities in Orange, Rockland, Sullivan, and Ulster counties. Next slide, please. So because we will be sending out this PowerPoint after the webinar, we've included links to a number of necessary documents, including the DEC municipal grant funding page and the fact sheets and the actual RFAs for the ZEV rebate and the ZEV infrastructure grant. And to give you a brief overview of the structure of the webinar, I'll do an overview of the ZEV infrastructure grant, and then Eleanor Peck will do a walkthrough of Grants Gateway to show you exactly how to get through that. Then I'll do a brief overview of the ZEV rebate. Eleanor will do a brief walkthrough there, and then we'll head into some other interesting and engaging opportunities that are available. Next slide, please. So the ZEV infrastructure grant is a little bit more complicated, so that is where we will start. We're getting the hard part out of the way first. Applications are accepted until September 30th of this year. This is an annual grant program. And this year, $5 million is available to municipalities for the purchase and installation of electric vehicle supply equipment or hydrogen fuel cell filling stations. There are a number of eligible types of infrastructure, but stations must be networked unless network connectivity is not available. Eligible expenses include equipment, supplies, materials, installation costs, and up to 2 years of electrical use and warranty and networking, and site preparation costs. There's more detail on this on page 10 of the RFA. A municipality may apply for multiple stations in multiple locations. However, the max award amount for any one location is $250,000, and to any one municipality for multiple locations is $500,000. All facilities must be available primarily for public use, but if they are shared with the municipal fleet, you'll need to submit a shared use plan detailing when they're available to the municipal fleet or how many ports are available to the municipal fleet. And finally, match. A match of 0 to 20% of the total project cost must be provided by the municipality. That match is based on the median household income of the municipality, and we'll go into a little bit more detail there in just a moment. So for some of the municipalities on this call, you might be able to install a charging station free of cost. Next slide, please. So to go into the match requirements in a little bit more depth, if the 2016 through 2020 median household income of the municipality is greater than $71,117, a match is required. If it's between $56,893 and $71,117, a 10% match is required. And if it's less than $56,893, a 0% match is required. You can determine the median household income of your municipality at data.census.gov. Instructions are in the Zero Emissions Infrastructure RFA, and you can also ask your coordinator for assistance with this. Eleanor Peck will be showing us during her walkthrough exactly how to get that information as well. There's also one more category that does not require a match. If the vehicle infrastructure is to be installed within an area that has been identified as a disadvantaged community according to the New York State Draft Disadvantaged Community Criteria, no match is required. The map that's most accessible to understand whether there's a community in your municipality that is a disadvantaged community is the DEC info locator has the easiest way to go through that. And Eleanor will demonstrate that as well. Next slide, please. So there are a number of necessary materials for the ZEV infrastructure grant, and we went through the RFA and compiled this list for you. It should be comprehensive. I'll note a couple of things on this list before we do the walkthrough. The first and potentially the most important thing is the quote from the installer. In order to apply for the ZEV infrastructure grant, you will need very specific information about what kind of charging station you are working, that you're planning to install. You'll also need maps of the facility location, and you'll need to denote any existing units as well as proposed new units. Eleanor will show you how to find those maps and how to prepare them. If the infrastructure is going to be used to charge the municipal fleet, as stated before, you'll need a shared use plan. If there's a partnership involved, for instance, if someone else is doing the maintenance or owns the area, then you'll need a memorandum of understanding, which can be very brief and just details the responsibilities there. And then if the charging station is located on non-applicant property, for instance, if it's located on the property of a village that's within a town, but the property belongs to the village, then you would need a climate change mitigation easement, which essentially states that that particular piece of land is going to be used for this specific purpose. And we do have an example of what that looks like. So charging stations can be located on non-municipal property or non-applicant property. It can be located on public property or private property, as long as there is a climate change mitigation easement for any non-applicant property that the charging station is located on. You'll also need an operations, maintenance, and monitoring plan. Again, this can be brief, but states, who is in charge of doing maintenance, for instance, clearing snow, checking cables, making sure the station is functioning. As part of applying for any grant on Grants Gateway, you will need a Smart Growth Assessment Form, Attachment S, which is a sexual harassment prevention certification form, an Executive Order 16 form. And then in addition to those forms, you'll need cost effectiveness documentation, which should include both the quote and market prices for equipment. So essentially comparing the quote to the market price. You'll need a budget and a work plan, and Eleanor will go through those two items in more detail as well. Next slide, please. So because finding a quote is a prerequisite to applying for the grant, we've indicated that, and this information is from the RFA, that you can use the Make Ready program approved contractors list to find a qualified contractor. Contractors can be sorted by utility region, and municipalities must consider minority and women-owned business enterprises for construction and electrical work if the grant that you're applying for is $25,000 or more. 30% of the grantees will be required to work with such a business, but it's difficult to know necessarily which grantees will be required until after. So it is important to consider those businesses for this, for any contracting or construction and electrical work. The equipment that you choose to install must be listed as qualified either on the NYSERDA Charge Ready New York program or on the New York State Office of General Services, EVSE and Network Services state contract. Both of those links in this PowerPoint will take you directly to those places. And finally, it's important to make sure that the contractor sees the RFA for all listed equipment requirements. Page 9 is where those are listed. Next slide, please. So it's crucial to note here, and then we'll go directly into the walkthrough, that the Grants Gateway role, the assigned role of the person completing the application, must be either a grantee or the signatory. The consultant or contractor cannot be the signatory. The signatory has to be the municipality, but they can be the grantee or they can inform the application process. You could, for instance, print out the application, provide them with all the questions and have you provide them with the answers. However, the signatory has to submit the application. The municipality itself has to submit the application. And with that, that's the overview of the ZEV infrastructure grant. And Eleanor will go directly into the walkthrough.
Thanks, Kat. Just going to warn everyone in advance, this part of the webinar might be a little bit dry. We are going into the portal itself to walk through exactly what you need to do to apply. So just putting that out there ahead of time. So this is Grants Gateway. This is where that link will take you. This is where you're going to actually submit the information for the grant. We're not going to tell you in this webinar how to register your organization, your municipality in Grants Gateway. There are lots of tutorials. We have the links in the next slide of the presentation that we'll send out about all the tutorial information about how to do this. But we're assuming a lot of municipalities, if not all of them, already are registered in the Gateway. So I'm going to log into HVRC's account here. This is where you would log in. This website is a little pokey sometimes, so I apologize in advance for that too. So in order to find the ZEV grant, when you're going to look at the application, you're going to go to View Opportunities down here. And this is where you're going to, the first time you look for this grant, this is how you're going to get to it. I'll show you in a moment how to get to the application once you've begun it. You're going to search for it. As you can see, there are these two applications available right now. We're going to go through the infrastructure grant first. We click this and then scroll down to click apply for grant opportunity. And this is how you're going to get into the portal. You see it's giving me this warning because I've already started an application. So you're going to click cancel if you've already started an application, and I'll show you now how to get to that application. You click up here to where it says applications. This is going to take you to every application that your organization has submitted. I've got ZEV up here in the grant opportunity name. I'm going to click search. And the one I'm looking for, I know, is this one. So this is the inside of Grants Gateway. It's where you're going to apply for the infrastructure award. Where you're going to do basically everything is in the forms menu up here. So I'm going to click that. And this has all the different sections of the application you're going to access. The most important ones that we're going to discuss today are the program-specific questions, because there's some doozies in there that I'm going to hopefully help make easier. Then the budget, how to do the budget, and the work plan. Those are the three we're going to, and the pre-submission uploads. Those are the ones we're going to go through today. But you can also, you can print the application, you can get the RFP in here, and you can see information about the contract. If you are awarded one of these grants, you'll get information about what that contract will look like up in here. So what I've done, rather than go into the program specific questions, we have a printed application where I've highlighted the ones that I want to go through with you because they seem to me to be, and to all of us here, as the trickiest. But if you have questions about any of these, if you have questions about these questions, you should feel free to reach out to your Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. They should be able to help, and we can liaise with the Department of Environmental Conservation or you can reach out to the DEC directly. So I'm going to scroll down to the questions that we have here. And the first one I have highlighted is question number 3. And this is the about figuring out whether your project is within a disadvantaged community. So this has this link here to the GIS services of DEC that has the map of disadvantaged communities. I have that link open here. So this is where it will take you. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to search. You're going to search by location, and you're going to plug in the address of where the chargers are going to be located, and you're going to search. And then it's going to pop right here. This is our the Hudson Valley Regional Council offices. So we're located in the city of Newburgh. It's hard to tell because we're so zoomed in, but right now all of Newburgh is a disadvantaged community. You can't actually see that until you zoom out a little bit. So I'll just do that to show you. Zoom out a lot. So as you can see, all of these gray, purple areas are within the disadvantaged community. But the way you figure that out is, oops, too close, is going to DEC information layers down here. And you're going to check the draft disadvantaged communities criteria here. So if I unclick that, you can see this is what the map will look like when you pull it up for the first time. And when you highlight that, then you've got the draft disadvantaged communities. So you're able to check yes to this question of whether the infrastructure is within a disadvantaged community. As you can see, there's 2 more parts to this question. The next one says, if yes, upload a street level map showing the location of the infrastructure in relation to the disadvantaged community, and a map showing the disadvantaged community in relation to the municipality. There's very specific directions for what they want you to do here in the RFA, and those are located in attachment C, which is on page 40. So there's detailed instructions with screenshots. They've really laid it out for you, but I'm going to do the same thing here, here on video. So make it super easy. So what they're looking for is you're going to click this public involvement. You're going to check draft disadvantaged communities criteria. You're going to make sure it's in the DAC. And then you're going to need the street level map at 600-foot scale. So you can tell this is in 600-foot scale because you see 600 feet down here in the corner. I hope you all can see that. And then you're going to go to tools. And here I've already written this in, but this is what they want the printout title to be. Newburgh City, that's the name of the municipality we're in. I named this project the Municipal Lot Charger, Muni Lot Charger, and then the name of the map is street level. My name is the author information, and then I'm going to click Generate Map. And this is what it's going to make a PDF of for you. So you're going to upload this to your application. And you are also going to make a high level map. Now for the high level map, what they want you to do is zoom out to 1 mile scale. So you're essentially going to click the minus button until you see 1 mile in this bottom corner. Now we're here, so it really gets at the boundaries of where the municipality is. You also need the one to click reference layers. I've already got it on, but this is going to come without any of these checked, the cities, towns, and villages, and we want to make sure they are checked. Particularly, the most important one is the one that your municipality is, because they want to make sure that it's within the boundaries of the municipality is where you're putting your charger. Then you're going to go back to tools. And you're going to change this to high level. And then you're going to generate that map. And that map is going to look like this, as you can see. So once you've got these 2 PDFs, you're going to have to combine them. Can sometimes be a little tricky to combine PDFs in my experience, but there are applications on the web. If you Google combine PDFs, there's free tools online that should be able to help you do that. I'm going to admit someone from the waiting room. Okay. So this is what you're going to upload. That's those 2 maps are what you're going to upload here. The next question is another doozy. It is, what is the 2016 to 2020 median household income of the municipality per census table B19013? And again, they've got really great instructions in the RFA. This is on attachment B of the RFA on page 34. It gives instructions on how to do this. I again have this web page open. And I've already done it, which I shouldn't have done. So I'm going to go back to this is where the main census page, you're going to click advanced search. You're going to enter that table ID, which is B19013. And then you're going to filter by geography. It depends what your municipality is. We're gonna pretend, again, this is Newburgh City that we're doing where my organization is located. So we're gonna click place. We're gonna find New York. And we're gonna look for Newburgh. And check that off. And then we're gonna click search. In this first table, median household income in the past 12 months in 2020 inflation adjusted dollars is what we're looking for. And minimize that. And so this number, this estimate is what you are looking to add to this table. Then we're going to go, back to the question list. The next question is, if the infrastructure is not going to be installed in the disadvantaged community, then now you're going to indicate the local match based on the median household income. So that gets back to the slide that Kat was mentioning earlier, which is, you either have a 10 or a 20 or a 0% match based on your median household income. This is an amount. This is detailing this question is about Make Ready, and Kat mentioned the Make Ready funds. We're going to talk about those in a little bit after I'm done walking through the grants gateway itself. The next question that could be tricky is how to find latitude and longitude. If we go back to the DEC info locator, you'll see latitude and longitude are here. So you can just use those based on the address that you have inputted into the DEC GIS situation here. So the facility location, this is, they define facility location in the RFA. I'm going to read it out to you here. A facility is a single location within a municipality that can be identified using institutional or commercial boundaries. So they mean an airport, a park, a mall, or a street. If there's an on-street installation, they're talking about a quarter-mile segment along the same street. That's one location. So if you're submitting for multiple locations based on that criteria, then you're going to need to submit multiple applications. So if the facility is not owned by an applicant, you have to submit a climate change mitigation easement, as Kat mentioned. This question is important because it has to be accessible to the public. You have to make sure that this is correct before you submit this, and make sure you click yes. This is about the shared use plan that Kat mentioned. If you're going to be charging your city, your municipal government cars with this with these charging stations, you have to have a shared use plan. And there's very specific requirements for how much the chargers can be used for the fleet versus the public in the RFA on page 14. So I would recommend looking through those if you get a chance, or if you're planning on using it for fleet charging at all. This is the partnership that Kat mentioned. You're going to need an MOU. You're going to want to make sure that that MOU really shows that you are, you've laid out who's responsible for what, who's going to be plowing the parking spaces in front of that charger. Really, really detail every little thing there. The operations, maintenance, and mitigation monitoring plan that Kat mentioned. This is required. You have to, the goal of this plan is to make sure that the units are available to the public at least 80% of the time. So they're going to be maintained. You have a plan for how you're going to maintain them. Again, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of plowing and parking enforcement, software functionality, all sorts of different things here that they're looking for. And that's detailed on page 13 of the RFA. The Smart Growth Infrastructure Policy Act and the Sexual Harassment Prevention Certification Form. You'll see there's sections. You can upload these documents here, and you can also upload them within the Grants Gateway down in the pre-submission upload section. I would recommend uploading them in both places. I'm going to show you where they are here. So you can find the templates here. Attachment S, that's that sexual harassment policy, the smart growth form, and there's also this executive order 16 that that shows you're not doing business with Russia. So you're going to download these templates and you're going to upload them again here, and also upload them where you are where you are putting the data in the program specific questions sections. The other things down here are, there's this letter of agreement. You don't need to sign this yet. This is just so you can see if you're applying for something under $10,000 that you'll see what your letter of agreement looks like. And there's also this work plan worksheet. We're going to talk about the work plan in a little bit. That's the sexual harassment certification form. Okay, now we get to two more maps. Well, one more map here first. So they want you to upload a map of the facility showing the location with distances relative to points of interest. This one, I have done this as a Google map. Where is it? So this one? That's the other one. I have done this as a Google map because Google helpfully already shows you lots of points of interest. And Google does have this little bar. I will say when Kat and I went over this webinar with folks from DEC, they were a little wary of this Google map idea. They didn't say it wouldn't be explicit or they wouldn't be accepted, but she did recommend if your municipality has GIS capabilities that they might want to see a little bit more, make sure that there's really enough stuff going on around your charger that it makes sense to put a charger there. They're looking for that as you can see, this would be a great location, our office for a charger. We've got coffee shops, we've got restaurants, we've got Washington's headquarters, museum here, we've got the DMV. This would be a great location where people can hang out for a little while as their car is charging. So if you are going to go this route, if you don't have a good way to get a better GIS showing the distances better to points of interest, I would really make sure you put this, put a screenshot in a Word document and explain what you're showing them in the map here. This is providing supplemental evidence of cost effectiveness, like quotes and all sorts of things. This gets back to the budget. There's when you're detailing what match you're using in the budget section, this is where they are asking for lots of supplemental evidence. And this is where you're going to be uploading that all as one big PDF. So the rest of this section is dependent on the type of infrastructure you're installing. So we're going to go through the level 2 EVSE infrastructure. That's the chargers that, take a little bit. They're usually, charge your car 4 to 8 hours. So this is what most applications I think would be for. There's also level 3 is the really fast chargers. And then they'll also accept applications for hydrogen filling stations. We're not going to go through those. We're just going to go through this one. But it's important to note that if you have to go through all 3 and click not applicable to every single of these questions if it doesn't apply to you. So if you're doing level 3 infrastructure, you'd write not applicable under all of these level 2 questions and the hydrogen filling station questions. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. And I wanted to note, these are all going to be pretty much answered by the type of charger that you use and by the person who's helping you install them, whether that's an electrician or someone on DPW staff can probably help you answer these, as well as the folks who are selling you the charging stations. I wanted to note these 2 questions, 35 and 36. The EVSE must be networked unless you live in a part of the state where there is no broadband service. And they have a letter that you can use to detail that, and that's described in the RFA. So I would just wanted to make note of that before we leave. The rest of the questions, if you need help with them, you should obviously reach out to your Clean Energy Communities coordinator, and they can probably help you, but worth looking into for sure, because I can't really answer them for you at this point in time. So once you've gone through the program specific questions, now we're going to go back to Grants Gateway. We're going to look at what else we need to submit. And I think the budget is going to be next that we're going to discuss. So as you can see here, there's lots of budget lines. Rather than starting in Grants Gateway, I would start with this spreadsheet that the DEC can supply you. This is it's essentially this online version in Excel format. So it's much easier to work with. It'll calculate things for you. And it's, I think, a lot less confusing. So you can reach out to DEC for this budget. You could also reach out to me or Kat, and we can probably send along a blank version when we send out the slides. I did add one thing here, and that's to calculate the match. One thing that we want to be really careful of is that if you do have that 10 or 20% match, Grants Gateway is not going to calculate that for you correctly. So you're going to have to make sure that you have the correct amount of match in your application. And this is the match funds divided by the total cost of the project, not the grant funds. So as you can see, I did this here at C16 over D16. So that's how we're getting that, that 24% match. So this goes through what exactly is allowed, and I've just sort of inputted a random assortment of things here. But as you can see, as you probably can imagine, in the RFA, they detail exactly what eligible and ineligible expenses are for match and for asking for as part of the project. So we've got some personnel as match here. This would be the Department of Public Works laborers that would be working on the project. You can see we've inputted their salaries and what percentage of them we're funding here. Contractual services, this might be an electrician. If you don't have an electrician on staff, you're probably not going to have travel. Equipment, this would be the charger costs, some software costs. You can use land value as match, and the DEC wanted us to be sure to remind you that this has to be just for the parking spots. They don't want the value of the buildings where the parking spots will be located used as match. Just that little square area of the parking spots around where the chargers will actually be located. You can use electricity costs for 2 years. You can, what you expect those electricity costs to be, you can ask for that. And then other, so signage, bollards, concrete used for the project. There's some random things that can be put in here as well. And again, this is not, the ones I just went through are not by any means a complete list. So definitely review the RFA for that, about what can actually be allowed as part of this grant. So then what you would do is you would input line by line in this budget what you're going to be looking for. And then you're going to do the match worksheet as well. I'm going to click into the match worksheet just so you can see what it is. So you have all the different types of, as you can see, I already inputted this in here, but you're detailing out what it is, and then you're going to say what the form of documentation you're providing is. And for instance, for the salary, it would be your payroll. And then this is going to be what you're going to put in that question box. You're going to upload into that question box where it said what the forms of documentation for your match. That's what that would be. Now we're going to get to the work plan. So there's 2 sections to this. Oh, I wanted to show you the expenditure summary as well. Sorry, give me one moment. So as you can see, this is going to end up looking a lot like this first page of the summary page of the ZEV template. So this is how you can really see, once you've inputted everything, you can make sure that you did it correctly. And as you can see, the Grants Gateway is not calculating the match correctly. So that's why we want to make sure that we're checking the match, because it's going to give you a higher number than it actually is. Back to the work plan. This is our last real thing to go through here. So this is the work plan itself. As you can see, DEC has already put in most of the things that you need to measure in here. And this is it's a finicky thing to look at, and that's why they have that worksheet. If you'd like to look at the worksheet in the program uploads, you can download that and look at it yourself. But I have a few things that I want to point out in here. There's essentially 5 things that you really need to change or might have to change in the work plan. Otherwise, you're pretty much good to go. The first one, develop and execute climate change mitigation easement. This doesn't have to happen if you own the property, if the municipality owns the property. So you can remove that if you own the property. The next thing that you would need to change is under objective 3. I'm just going to read out what she has in the RFA. So essentially, for objective 3, you need to know what your procurement policy is and how you're actually going to go about applying those procurement policies to this charging station. It really depends on whether you have an electrician on staff, whether you're buying equipment, or you're having some sort of project manager or installer doing the entire thing. So this is detailed exactly how you need to review objective 3 is detailed on page 32 of the RFA. So I'd recommend looking at that in detail. If you plan to purchase your equipment and hire a contractor, you might have to leave all of these tasks in. If you're going to hire an installer that's going to provide everything, you can delete task 1 and its performance measure. And if you intend to hire an electrician or any combination of contractors, you need to sort of edit who you're going to be hiring in tasks 2 and 3 down here, 3.2 and 3.3. The next things you're going to edit in this work plan is task 4.1. So this says, and it tells you in here, you have to edit this task to be specific about the work that's going to occur on each of these sites. The next thing is 5.1. You're going to edit to determine and to input what make, model, and type of infrastructure you're installing here. And 6.1.1, the performance measure. You need to list all the signs and wayfinding things that you're going to be installing in this performance measure. Other than that, the work plan should be pretty much ready to go. You can add other things to it. You don't have to be limited by what they've put here, but they've put essentially everything that would be required. So that's just to note. We've already gone through the upload. So essentially that is what you're going to need to do to apply for the ZEV infrastructure grant. And now I'm going to pass it back to Kat to continue with the webinar.
Great, thank you. And as I noted in the chat, please feel free to put any questions in there. We're going to go through the ZEV rebate overview and walkthrough, and then after that, I think that that's a good point to stop and answer some of these questions. So the ZEV rebate is a little bit easier. There are a few less questions for the walkthrough, so I think we'll have plenty of time to go through everything then. And thank you for your questions. They all look really great. I'm reading through them and look forward to answering them. So keep putting those in there. So this page is the Grants Gateway tutorial materials. I know that some communities may not have Grants Gateway access yet. I would assume most do, but if you don't have access yet, the process does take a couple of weeks to register. So I would recommend getting that done as soon as possible. And there are tutorials here. Next slide, please. So on to the ZEV rebate. And as I said, we'll have a chance to answer questions directly after this. Up to $750,000 is available to municipalities for the purchase or lease of eligible vehicles for fleet use. That can include new all-electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. There are different rebate amounts, and they're actually dependent on the electric range of the vehicle, as well as the weight. So if the weight rating is under 8,000 pounds, you can get $2,500 as a rebate if it has a 50 to 100 mile range. You can get $5,000 as a rebate if it has a 100 to 200 mile electric range, and you can get $7,500 as a rebate with an electric range vehicle of over 200 or more miles. And then for any vehicle that has a weight rating above 8,000 pounds and under 14,000 pounds, you're eligible for a rebate of $7,500 regardless of range. So eligible vehicles must be new, and they must be placed into municipal service at a dealership in New York State between August 1st, 2020 and the closing date of this opportunity, which is September 30th. So the vehicle has to have been purchased already. If leased, the lease term must be no less than 36 months. So it has to be at least a 3-year lease term. And again, vehicles must be purchased before the application for a rebate is made. This rebate does open annually. So if you purchase a vehicle within the next year, I would assume that the vehicle rebate will be open again next year. And finally, limits. A municipality may apply for multiple rebates for multiple vehicle purchases. However, no more than 50% of available funding will be awarded to any one municipality. Next slide, please. So the list of necessary materials here is a bit shorter because the vehicle will have already been purchased. So basically they need vehicle information, make, model, range, weight, and vehicle identification number. They will need proof of the vehicle registration or the certificate of origin, MV50, and signed delivery declaration. They'll need a bill of sale or a lease agreement. And again, note that the lease term has to be greater than 36 months. The budget breakdown, which Eleanor will go through in the walkthrough, and then attachment S, an executive order 16 form. Those are both fairly brief to fill out. And as Eleanor noted in her last walkthrough, they are available under the forms section of Grants Gateway. Next slide, please. So these are the application evaluation factors. This is basically pass-fail. Applications for the ZEV rebate are accepted on a rolling basis. So the vehicle has to be an eligible vehicle as defined in the RFA and by ECL 54-1521. The vehicle can't have a gross weight rating of more than 14,000 pounds. It has to be leased or purchased or leased and placed into municipal service on or after August 1st, 2020, and before the end date of this opportunity. The lease must be at least 36 months, and the vehicle must have been placed into municipal service at a dealership located in New York State. There's no further review. If your vehicle passes all of these requirements, then it will be awarded a rebate. But again, I would say these applications are accepted on a rolling basis, so it's important to get this in quickly. Next slide, please. And so this is, again, the Grants Gateway. We went through the roles earlier that are necessary, and I will hand it over to Eleanor to go through, again, a briefer walkthrough.
Yes, much briefer. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the homepage here. So we're going to go back to applications because I've already started this. I just want to show you really one specific thing in this rebate that is important to note. And this is also in the, where is it? There it is. This is also in the RFA, but the forms menu here, we're going to go to the forms menu, and it's really important how you enter this budget, how they want you to enter the budget. You'll see there's just this contractual line. What they are looking for here is we have to show the rebate amount is in the grant funds in the contractual line. So we're assuming this car is worth that $7,500 rebate. We're going to put that in this total grant funds line. And then the rest of the cost of the vehicle. So everything that the municipality is covering or that we've covered under other grants is under total other funds. So then the category total is going to be the total cost of the vehicle. And that is what we are looking for here. So other than that, this is going to be pretty similar to what we're seeing in the infrastructure grant, except a lot easier, right? So you have the pre-submission upload section. You have a few program-specific questions, basically just getting at those the 5 pass or 6 pass fail things that Kat noted. Other than that, you're pretty. This is relatively simple for municipalities that have already purchased a car at a dealership in New York State. That is all I wanted to show you all here. So I'm going to, actually, Kat, you said you wanted to do questions now?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea maybe to go through the questions that we got in the chat. Most of them are, I think, related to the infrastructure grant. So I think if a good way to do it is maybe I'll state the question out loud and then Eleanor or I will come up with an answer. So Faye Leone says, I have a question about the sequence of applying for this grant versus getting quotes from installers. So we mentioned before that you need a quote from an installer. I do believe there are people, and Eleanor, correct me if I'm wrong, there might have been folks who applied without a quote, but it really simplifies the process to have one. So I would say that that's really important, and you should definitely get a quote from an installer before that. And then the next question from Stacy Mantell is, does a municipality have to do an RFP for the contractor? So different municipalities have different rules about this one. Some municipalities only require an RFP if, for instance, if the cost of the project is going to be over $25,000. That's one limitation that I've heard before. But it does depend on the municipal procurement rules, and typically municipal staff will be well aware of what those procurement rules are. So it depends on the particular municipality is what I would say. Eleanor, do you have anything to add there?
I do not, except to say, I don't think you should be doing an if your municipality does require an RFP, this isn't necessarily the installer that you're going to have to go with, the one that you submit the quote from. So I think getting a quote, you don't need an RFP to get a quote. This is just, to have that information available to the state. If you need an RFP, you should do one after you are awarded the grant. And then, I wanted to, this next question is, what is the smart growth assessment? So I put this up on the screen. This is what you download from the website. And as you can see, there are these questions that you would have to answer here. And my understanding is a lot of DEC grants require this. So presumably there would be someone in your municipality who is at least relatively familiar with it. But it's a little bit intensive.
All right, our next question is from Lindsay Ouden, and he asks, to find an acceptable contract, you reference those listed at the Make Ready webpage. The RFA doesn't mention that list. And then the question is, isn't that list for the Make Ready program such that we are not required to use it in this DEC grant? So yes, that is accurate. You're not required to use the Make Ready contractors for this list. However, it is often a helpful place to find contractors who are willing to do this sort of work. So if you don't know where to start looking for a quote, you can certainly sort that by utility territory and start looking within your territory. And then the final part of this question is, please also differentiate the installation contractor from the charger vendor. So some vendors are willing to do the installation for you. Some are like turnkey, they'll do the entire thing. Others will just sell you the charging station, and then you can either install it yourself or hire an installation contractor to do that work. So there are a number of ways to approach this. I think that's the main difference. There can be a difference between the installation contractor and the charger vendor if you're going with a vendor who does not provide turnkey services and does not install the station themselves.
And I think that gets back to the part of the work plan where there are multiple tasks, and you might have to figure out your procurement policy and exactly how you are going to be going about installing this charger. A lot of municipalities don't have an electrician on staff, so they're going to have to hire an electrician, or they're going to use one of these turnkey installers that Kat was mentioning. But some municipalities that are really, they have the capabilities to do this, they're going to be just inputting a quote from the charging station company themselves, and the rest of it is going to be done in-house, and that's perfectly fine.
All right, so the next question is from Stacy Mantel. She says the area they are considering is owned by the MTA, Metropolitan Transportation Authority. There's already parking, and there may be some type of easement. Would we still need the climate change mitigation easement in addition? So I'm not sure about this particular situation, but in any instance where the property is not owned directly by the municipality that is applying for the grant, you will need the climate change mitigation easement. Yes.
It might be worth reaching out to the ZEV program, Stacy, with this question, but my understanding, and I'm with Kat on this, I think it's like 99% they're going to require it.
Yes. And then, is a charging station with 2 ports considered 1 or 2 charging station? It's considered 1 charging station. I think most charging stations come with 2 ports, but yes, so it's considered 1 charging station, even though it has multiple ports. Okay, next question, Ben Swanson. Ben inherited an existing ZEV grant from his predecessor. They're in the process of getting a vendor to install, but it sounds like the predecessor should have already gotten installer quotes. If so, do those quotes typically include procurement of the stations themselves, or is that done by the municipality with the installer just handling actual labor of putting it in the ground? So if your predecessor did not get a particular quote, or if that person has since lost the relationship with the company that they got the quote from, I would say it's necessary to source new quotes. And again, as we explained earlier, some of the vendors may be willing to do the installation of, they may be turnkey, they may be willing to do the installation of the stations. And some may not, some may just sell you the station directly, and then you figure out the back end work of doing the electrical work, if any trenching needs to be done, etc. I hope that that answers that question. Eleanor, do you have anything else there?
Yeah, no, I would just say it really depends on what your municipality wants to do.
But I would say, Ben, also feel free to reach out to your Clean Energy Communities Coordinator, and they may be able to help with that process if you're confused at all. That sounds worthy of a one-on-one conversation, I think. And then the next question is, can the town match be covered by NYSEG Make Ready funds? So the match for the ZEV infrastructure grant can be covered sometimes entirely by Make Ready funds. I can't recall if there are still Make Ready funds available in NYSEG territory. I believe that there are. So yes, it can.
And we have a few slides on Make Ready too coming up.
Yes, definitely. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Is there anything that you have noticed this grant does not cover with regards to infrastructure, installation, labor, and hardware? So to my understanding, this grant can absolutely cover all of those things. You just need to know what the costs are and be upfront about those in the budgeting process. So if you're going to have a particular amount of town staff working, you need to list those staff, the amount, their salary amount, and then the amount of time that they'll be spending on this. But this grant can cover infrastructure, installation, labor, and hardware. Yes, as well as up to 2 years of projected electricity use for the station and 2 years of warranty. So it covers everything basically. Tyler Huffman, for the EV charging infrastructure application, are we required to get more than one quote? Oh, Eleanor?
I just wanted to know, in addition to what you told Nina, that there are a whole list of eligible expenses in the RFA. I would go through those with a fine tooth comb and make sure it's covering everything that you want it to cover before you submit.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to Tyler's question. Are you required to get more than one quote? Also, are these projects subject to Davis, Bacon, and MWBE requirements? So I'll answer the first question first. In order to apply for this grant, you'd need at least one quote. You don't need to go through, as Eleanor stated, the full RFP process, though your municipality may choose to do so. So for this grant, you just need one quote and the details that are necessary for the application questions, basically. And if that changes, if you decide to change vendors or installers, I believe that that's acceptable to the DEC as long as the basic requirements stay the same. And you will at some point have to submit a finalized sort of bid to them with the information about the actual installation. But that comes later on once the grant is awarded. And then the second part of the question, are these projects subject to Davis, Bacon, and MWBE requirements? So I will say about the MWBE part, they are subject to MWBE requirements. I believe there's a certain percentage of the projects that needs to be conducted by minority or women-owned businesses. So if your project is over $25,000, I would say you can certainly you would need to pay attention to that. It's not necessarily that the person you select has to be an MWBE business, but it is something to note at this stage. And then after the grant is awarded, you will be notified whether that is something that you have to pay attention to during the procurement process. You'll be sent an email. The DEC will communicate with you about that, or the office of the MWBE office will communicate that to you. And then even then, if you're not able to meet those requirements, there is a waiver that you can submit if you're not able to find someone who meets those requirements, or if there's another reason. And then Davis-Bacon, I'm not sure. Eleanor, do you have any idea? We can look into that one. So feel free to send us an email and we'll look into it. Okay. Eleanor, do you want to take the next one?
Sure. So Stacy asks if Amelia is a DAC, are there parts of the application she doesn't have to do like the budget because of that? And the answer to that is unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, there are no parts of the application you do not have to do if you're a disadvantaged community, but you just don't have to provide any match. So you do still have to have a budget, you have to have a quote, you have to submit all the questions, just like any other community would. And Amanda helpfully notes that there are charging stations that are single port out there. And DEC is mainly concerned with the number of ports. So that is something to keep in mind. A lot of stations are dual port, and there will be parts of that section of the application we didn't go through thoroughly is where you get into the nitty gritty about what charging station you're buying, how many ports there are, what the kilowatt hours of that port are, all of those details. Cheryl asks what communities are doing after 2 years of electric costs. Cheryl, this is anecdotal. You don't necessarily have to do this, but a lot of communities start charging or are charging the whole time for people to use that charging station. You can ask around, see what other municipalities are doing, but generally there's a cost associated with using these chargers, and that comes back as revenue for the municipality. I'll note there's also networking costs associated with these charging stations. Sometimes they can be a fair amount of money, a few $100 a year, sometimes a little bit more. I know Amanda Mazzoni might be able to chime in a little bit better about what she's seen. So that is something to take into consideration as well. You won't just have electricity costs after the 2-year period is up. You'll also have those network costs to keep in mind.
And I will say, I believe you can only apply for funding for electric costs if you are providing charging free of charge to residents of the municipality or folks who use the charging station. If you are gaining revenue through essentially selling charging services, then you're not eligible to apply for electric costs.
Good point, Kat. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know this grant is complicated, the infrastructure grant, and I just want to state we're going to move on to the next part of the presentation, I think, since we've gone through all of the questions. But if you do have any remaining questions, or if there were particular sections of the application that you don't understand and that we didn't go into in depth, please feel free to reach out to us, or if you're from a different region, your own Clean Energy Communities Coordinator will have the link on the final page of the slide so you can find out who that person is. So here, I wanted to briefly go into the Joint Utilities Make Ready program. This is a program that is in every utility within the state that belongs to the joint utilities. So it wouldn't, for instance, be applicable to a municipal utility. But this program offsets infrastructure costs with regards to charging station site preparation. So this can include costs like trenching, digging up the concrete to actually install the cords for that. It can include a number of different things. And the Make Ready program does not pay for the charger itself, just the infrastructure costs with regards to charging station site preparation. There's a better explanation of that and what that includes on the Joint Utilities website. We've put the link up top here. And this links directly to the utility page for each utility. So the link that we have is the main page that explains how everything works. And then there's a specific application within each utility that you would need to fill out. I would say if your municipality does have a match requirement, this funding can be used as match for the ZEV infrastructure grant. So you would have to apply for the Make Ready funding, be approved for that, and then use that as match for the ZEV infrastructure grant, because you need to know how much funding the utilities are giving you and put that into your budget. There's a little bit more detailed information available on the slide. For instance, the incentive level is up to 100% for publicly available DCFC projects with standardized plug types that are located within disadvantaged communities, and level 2 projects at multi-unit dwellings located within disadvantaged communities. Up to 90% funding is available to publicly available L2 and DCFC projects with standardized plug types located outside of disadvantaged communities, and etc. I won't go through the whole list. I feel it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, once you look at it for a little bit. But if you do have questions about the amount of funding, again, there are folks you can contact who can help you understand what that will look like. I will say the Make Ready application, from the ones that I've seen, the utilities that I've seen, tends to be pretty brief. It's not as involved of a process as the ZEV application, so it should be possible to do. All right, next slide. So the Joint Utilities DCFC per plug incentive provides an annual declining per plug incentive to qualifying public DCFC operators. So this is specifically for direct current fast chargers, which are significantly faster and also significantly more expensive than level 2 chargers. As you can see, in most of the utility territories, there are still a significant amount of incentive funds remaining. So if your municipality is considering a fast charging station, a level 3, then I would certainly recommend applying for this. The purpose of the incentive is to support DCFC while utilization is relatively low by offsetting electric delivery costs. So it really makes it possible to install these stations before EVs are all the rage and everyone has one, by offsetting the electric delivery costs. That's the purpose of the program. And there is more information available, again, at the link to the website. Next slide, please. I also briefly wanted to mention a couple of other programs. There are 3 more slides to go through. As of May 27th, 2022, sorry, I should back up. The New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program provides voucher amounts for vehicles in weight classes 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in return for the scrappage of a qualifying pre-2009 electric vehicle. So if you, for instance, buy an on-road battery electric vehicle transit bus, you will get the stated voucher amount as long as there is the scrappage of a qualifying pre-2009 gasoline powered vehicle. And the purpose of this is to really ensure that the emissions reductions are locked in, that you're not just adding an electric bus, for instance, to your fleet while not retiring an older vehicle. So that is the purpose of this program. We didn't go into it in depth today, but there is more information available, and you can talk to your Clean Energy Communities coordinator about this program if you're interested, or if your municipality is interested in a more heavy duty truck that is battery electric. So I also wanted to mention the EPA Clean School Bus rebates. So the applications are due August 19th. of this year. This is, I believe, the first year of the program, but there are significant rebates for zero emissions vehicles, clean natural gas vehicles, and propane vehicles. Because the emissions reduction is obviously higher with zero emissions vehicles, the incentive amounts or the rebate types are much higher for those. But for instance, if you have a really old propane vehicle and you're replacing it with a new class 7+ propane vehicle, there is funding available for that as well. And there are probably a number of municipalities that will opt to do that because of the lower upfront cost of buying a propane vehicle. So it's also worth noting that there are prioritization criteria for this grant, and that grant amounts or vehicles that serve school districts that are prioritized will receive a higher rebate amount. So we went through the New York State list of prioritized school districts and found all of the ones in the Mid-Hudson region that are prioritized and that would receive the higher funding level if that's something that you're interested in. Again, you'll be provided this list when we send out the PowerPoint, but the list of prioritized school districts is available on the EPA Clean School Bus Rebates website if you're not from the Mid-Hudson. And there is a correction in the chat. East Ramapo is not in Orange, it's in Rockland. Yes, that is completely accurate. Sorry about that. We'll edit that before we send this out. And next slide. And so this is really the last thing we wanted to talk about. And it's sort of exciting news to see this federal funding coming down the pipeline. New York has received $22 million in funding this year from the National Electric Vehicle Initiative, which was established by the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. The New York State Department of Transportation will receive approximately a total of $175 million through this program over 5 years. The program requires funds to be invested within 1 travel mile of designated EV corridors. And New York State's designated corridors include many of the state's most traveled interstate and state highways. If you have comments on which highways were designated and where you think charging stations should go, there is an opportunity to submit comment on that, and the link is on the slide. So that, I believe, is the end of our PowerPoint. We have one more slide for you. If you could go to the next slide. This is just our contact information. Feel free to schedule with us through Calendly to discuss not only the ZEV rebate and ZEV infrastructure grant, but any of these other opportunities that we mentioned. If you're not from the Mid-Hudson region, you can find your Clean Energy Communities coordinator at the link if you're not already in contact with them. And if you have very technical questions about the DEC ZEV grants, you can contact the grant administrator, Myra Fedniak, at zevrebate@dec.ny.gov. So with that, I would love to thank everyone for their time. Thank you all for attending. We hope that this is helpful to you as you pursue these grants. You know, it's very much a tutorial style webinar, so apologies if it was a bit more dry than our usual content, but we're glad to see you all here and happy to take further questions via email or via phone. So thanks for your time, everyone.